Welcome to Insight-Driven Decisions, how leaders turn insight into strategic impact. Our goal is helping you move from insight to impact to action, and doing all this through decision-grade insights.
Hello, friends. I'm John Burshek. I'm joined with John Willie today. More about us in a bit. First, let me start by just taking a quick moment to lay out a situation, and then John, you can comment on it as well. But I just want to lay out this situation that I see happen with companies. We're just kind of using this as a starter here today. The Insight team walks into the room. They've done great work. Research is solid. Insights are sharp. Analysis is sharp. Present the findings. Everybody in the room nods. Boy, that's interesting. That's good work. That's great. Great work. Good to know. And then meeting ends. Everybody leaves. Nothing changes. No strategy shifts, no product decisions move, no resources get reallocated. And the uncomfortable part is insights didn't fail because they were necessarily wrong. They failed because they were never built to survive the real decision, which leads us to our big concept from episode 1, which was insight and decisions are disconnected. And once you realize that that's a pattern, you start realizing most organizations don't have an insight problem. They have a decision architecture problem. And that's what today's episode is about. So welcome back. I'm John Burshek. Most of my career has been spent outside of companies, working with all types and sizes of companies, from the biggest in the world, the Amazons and Apples, all the way through to venture startups. My whole goal across all those years and all those companies, helping leadership teams design customer experience, intelligence, and insight that actually changes what happens in the business in a real world measurement fashion. John, I'll let you introduce yourself.
John Willie, and I've spent most of my career in audience research and consumer insights, primarily in the media space, both content distribution and content creation. So I've been on the client side of the fence for pretty well the whole of my career.
So between the two of us, we've lived both sides, same problem, same table, designing insight and then watching what happens when it tries to meet the real decision environment. Doing a quick wrap up from episode 1 that you can go and look at. We just want to make sure that we anchor ourselves in what we did uncover in that episode, because there were 4 big ideas that set up everything we're about to talk about today. The first is organizations don't have an insight problem, they have a decision problem. Just kind of already mentioned that, but that was the very first thing that came out of our first episode. That is, most companies are producing more data, more research, more analytics than ever, yet the influence of that insight is shrinking. Asking the reason why, the answer comes back because the insight work is usually happening outside of the decision environment. Second thing we talked a little bit about in episode 1 was insight itself almost always lives upstream from accountability. And what we mean by that, and as we defined in our first episode, people producing insight, usually not the ones that have to go to the mat to make the business call, which means the work gets evaluated intellectually, but nobody's really evaluating it operationally. And then number 3, insight dies when no one owns the decision. We talked a lot about that in episode 1. This seems really obvious, but it happens more than anyone likes to admit. If a piece of intelligence isn't tied to a real decision that someone owns, it has nowhere that it can go. And then the last one, this one I think would take listeners by surprise. Great insight still will fail if it never reaches the decision moment. And this is the one where, because companies assume the work is good enough, it will somehow naturally influence the outcome. And everybody in the insights community is guilty of this, and even in the leadership sphere is guilty of this as well. Just, okay, that was really good. I got a couple of things. I think everything's going to be great. Nothing actually changes, because that's not how decisions actually work inside organizations. The uncomfortable truth that we discussed last time was this: most of what companies call insight never has been built for the decision-making moment in the first place. John, that's my take on it. What's your take on it as well?
I think that's a pretty good summation of it. I mean, I think A way to look at it is to say that there needs to be a bridge built between the people who are doing the insights and mining the data and the people who are responsible for the decisions. And so when there is real input both ways, the people on the insight side really understanding what is the business decision before them, and the people on the decision side conveying as accurately and as articulately as possible what the business decision is that they're facing and what the pressures are around it. That is when real, you know, decision grade insights can be produced. And I think that's really where we're at.
So when we're summarizing everything from episode one, I think it can come down to a couple of sentences. Insight isn't valuable because it's interesting.
Yep.
Insight's only valuable because someone is willing to act on it. So that brings us to the question for today's episode, which is what kind of insight actually earns that level of confidence? Not as a theory, but as the standard, the gold standard that all insight should meet if it's going to influence real decisions. And that brings us to defining the decision grade intelligence. This is what this whole episode is about. This isn't about more data. It's not about better dashboards. And if you listen to episode one, it certainly is not about better storytelling techniques. Decision grade intelligence means something really specific. So here it is. It means the intelligence was designed from the start to reduce uncertainty for a real decision. And wait, we're not done yet, that someone actually owns. So saying that again, because this ownership piece is what really matters. Decision grade intelligence has to reduce uncertainty. And I know, John, you talked about that a lot in episode one. It has to reduce uncertainty for a specific decision owner. If no owner exists, then it just simply can't be decision grade, no matter how smart it is. Now, this sounds real simple, sounds like it should be what everybody thinks about, but it really makes a difference how you start. And I'm going to share the first story, and then Johnny, we'll jump over to you because this one I just came off of a couple of weeks ago. And I thought this was great to share with us. This is as you get into these things, you talk to all kinds of people. The concepts we're dealing with, if you're a leader, if you're an agency leader, if you're a marketing guru in a big Fortune 500, or you're like the situation I'm going to tell you, an entrepreneur, it doesn't really matter because all of the leaders that need to make a decision have to have the process started differently for us to get to a different ending point. So I was on an introductory call with an entrepreneur. She was launching a business targeting young athletes. So this is a brand new company. It's early stage, real limited budget, very real risk on every decision in front of her, like personal risk. If you've been an entrepreneur, you know this is your life that you're taking a chance with. What struck me about her was she had no fear. And reason for that, one of the reasons, was she had a real clarity around what she didn't know. So she's walking us through questions like, I just need to know how many athletes will use this product. What features that I'm going to potentially pitch will matter most at launch? Where do I go get them? Do I use influencers? Do I cut partnerships? What are the channels I use to get to these folks? The ultimate question, what gets me the market penetration fastest before I run out of runway? And her runway was truly her funds. So every one of those decisions, high stakes, this is not an academic exercise. It's make it or break it. And I remember telling her, look, we can go get those answers. That part is solvable, not a big deal for us. And yes, if you're a leader in that situation, you hear that out of an insight producer's mouth. We see you relax. We see you go, what? Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's just wonderful. Now, part of that's good because you're now assured the risk is manageable. And truly, she felt it the way I intended it, which is, hey, look, we got you. Okay. We'll cover for you. We've got you. Don't worry about it. We'll get those answers. And this is where 99% of the decision makers and the leaders feel good. And this is where insight producers, we just kind of move on to, okay, we're going to do this process and this technique, and we're going to get this sample and blah, blah, blah. blah, blah, blahs, as John likes to say. So I'm still in your thunder there. But this is exactly the place in the process where things get interesting because I asked her something she was not expecting at all. I said, before we do anything, give me your 3 to 5 decisions you'd make immediately if you knew the answers. It was like she hit a brick wall. Almost no leader gets asked that first. They're used to being asked what they want to learn, not what they're prepared to do. So we talked for another 20 minutes, unplanned, just about the implications of that question. And that, my friends, is what changes everything. If you're a leader and you're not getting asked those, that's one thing. If you're a leader and you are getting asked those and you can't answer, that's a completely different situation. But we are not designing, and we shouldn't be designing insight around curiosity. We should be designing it around consequence, around impact. And that is exactly what those kind of questions that start when everybody else thinks that we're done and moving forward with a technique or a methodology or process or whatever, we're still talking about the implications. And so, Johnny, I know we talked a lot in the previous episode about our joint effort with product innovation, moving it upstream in the decision-making process on a specific, not just a project. I mean, it was an ongoing effort that we ended up going through. We talked about it in depth, but we took a true innovation from a plaything for the company that the techies had come up with, and they were all excited, and we helped the leadership see it being a concept that had real teeth and they could make a real decision on it. And we did that with what we would call decision grade intelligence. It basically made it that it had to be taken seriously. If you don't mind recapping that situation for our friends listening here, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, in that particular instance, the network had developed some technology that allowed audience interaction with the programming on a real-time basis, just audience members at home. And it was sort of viewed, I think, as just sort of a nice additive, like maybe it would be fun for people to do this. And it was an exploration to see, number one, we were doing some usability testing and we were doing some, obviously like some interest testing. And I think what happened was we uncovered the fact that it exploded very quickly. People were beyond interested in this, and people were going to crazy measures to be able to do it in the test environment that we had, because the operator that we were working with was not as advanced technologically. So people had to make extra efforts in order to be able to engage using this technology, but they wanted to do it. And furthermore, if you recall, they were willing to pay for the privilege of doing it. So it kind of exploded from just like, hey, this would be a neat thing that maybe we could, add some value to the audience's experience with our programming, to there's a real business opportunity in this. This is much, much bigger than we ever saw. And you and I explored that very in depth, and we carried it on several levels, all the way up the chain of command to the very top. And at that point, it did not go the way that I had hoped that it would go, but I have always felt like we did yeoman's work, and whatever the decision was, it was an informed decision, because that was some of the best work and most comprehensive work I think that I've ever been involved with.
It actually, from starting around a table, and if anyone wants to listen to the full story on episode 1, around a table with a bunch of techies that were just excited about what they could do. One of those things that comes up when you're dealing with technology people. Oh my gosh, we could do this. And then finding out that no, not only is it something you could do, it actually is a really great idea. And people not only love it, your customers, they're wanting to pay for it. And your main point at that end is all the way up to the decision chain. Yes, it's not a decision we would have made, but here's where I was going with the key points on this. The first thing that we looked at was, in order for a decision to be able to move that way, it has to have some kind of a strong impact to the entire company. And we learned that this one did. So when the decision is just tangential or incremental, hey, what color should we make this logo, or whatever the case may be, those are they're not like, you shouldn't have those decisions put in front of customers instead of your ad agency passing them around the back room. But they're not this type of decision. This is where the insights that we experienced had to get stronger. They had to withstand more scrutiny. They had to be sharper, better at every step of the way. So when you're asked with producing the insight that really moves a needle, or can, in our case, can move a business needle, as we found out, the first room you usually present in is rarely the room where the decision actually lives. And we learned that. John, you want to talk about it? We came back and it was great and everything. And then you made the phone call that says, should we move this up?
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that made that perhaps a unique situation in contrast with the story that you just shared with the entrepreneur and the athletic product that she's trying to bring to market, the people that we were working with at the time with the network that I was at, I don't think anybody even had the slightest notion that this could be something more than what they had seen it as. So it wound up. The research actually told us that there was an important decision to be made. People didn't ask us to go in and say, hey, we're thinking about completely upending our business model. Should we go ahead with it? They had no idea that this thing even had that capability of doing that. That's what we uncovered. And so we actually presented them with a decision based on our work that needed to be made. That shows the value of the work that we did in the first place. I mean, it eventually did become obvious to them that this was a big decision that needed to be made.
Yeah.
And I can understand. I mean, yeah, it was a big one. And I can understand, how it would be made the way it was. In the story that you were sharing about the entrepreneur, she knows what her product is. She knows what her market is. The idea that you would say to her, okay, if I can do all these things, but what are the decisions that you're going to make immediately based upon this work? That's the sort of question that on the insight side of things, we need to be asking, because then we can engage with the decision makers and they can have equity investment, both, emotionally and intellectually in the work that we're doing. And that then creates the bridge that's needed to make this stuff decision great, in my experience and in my opinion, obviously.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And this is actually my second synopsis of the story, even from episode one. It was really fascinating because I think the dream, and especially when you framed it as, no, wait a minute, the insights kept driving the fact that, wait a minute, this is a really critical thing. We've got to keep going up, 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 up. That is a little bit different than what my story was with inflaming the initial start, or informing the initial start with that process to begin with. It wasn't even on the horizon when we were talking about this project. And that's why I think it's even more cool with the project that we're talking about here. We had the president of the company. This is kind of like an insight team dream thing, right? Okay, in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody with chief in their name. Okay, so you're in my seat. What would you do? And it's not that we need to go into, how good that made us feel, although it made us feel like stars. But anyway, that aside, that's when the work you've done, that's its zenith. It doesn't matter what the decision is at that point. It's now you have the top decision makers in the room sitting around the table, and they're literally going, we're open to what you're thinking you would do if our money was your money and you had to make that decision. So all of that to go, we started over here in one place. We kind of gained steam because the insight said we had to. And then eventually we're at that level where we had no intention of really going, but it's what kept getting asked. The questions kept getting asked. The answers kept coming back. The decision grade information was there and just withstood all of the daggers that could be thrown at it. And that, I think, is something that is rare, but it is what we should strive. To your point, it is what we should strive. And the reason I'm saying that is why that is so important, or the story with the entrepreneur and asking those questions. We're kind of pulling back the curtain on why this doesn't happen all the time. Part of the reason executives spend more than ever on insight work, and then we are. I mean, you add it up. It's amazing what's being spent on insight work, no matter what you want to call it. And yet overall real world business success metrics, the ones that matters to them, have not changed in decades. The whole reason that exists is because of this point right here. Anything to add to that one?
No, I think you covered it. I mean, I mean, that is like that is the fundamental issue. We need to build that bridge.
Yeah. And in that case, even, and I know we covered this a lot in episode one, it wasn't that we guaranteed a specific outcome. It just simply was, we guaranteed one thing. We guaranteed that the ownership of that decision, and there was no question we were in front of the group that was, we guaranteed them they were fully informed. Like they could not walk away without knowing not only what, hey, everybody loves our stuff. No, that wasn't just it. It was, here's some actual financial forecasting that could be done on what we're seeing. And now it actually is something you need to consider from a real business perspective. That's as good as you can get, is getting that level of decision grade intelligence in front of ownership, I think.
I think, you've probably been in some of these meetings as well as I have, where you might present something that you believe is, stem to stern, comprehensive, and decision grade. And the person who does own the decision asks another question about a point that you haven't covered, or says, well, until I know this, I can't move forward. So you might have gone from A to Y, but then they want to know about Z. And you're like, right? And that's why, in that case, we had gone A to Z and Z to A. So they knew that they had all the information that they needed, because there wasn't any like doorknob ask, as the CEO is walking out the door, like, once you have that, come back and see me. There was none of that, right? We were tight. We had it together. And so it was a fully informed decision, as you and I both know, because we made the presentation both in a large group setting and in a one-on-one setting. And so, all of the implications were made very clear, and all of the information that was necessary to make a good decision were there, and the decision was made. This goes back to what we talked about in episode one a little bit. Sometimes that's all that you can do from the insight side. You can have your opinion as to what the decision might be. You can offer that opinion if it is asked of you, but then you also have to understand that more times than, I can't even think of one time. Oh, well, except the story you shared last week about your nonprofit thing. The people who are doing the data mining and creating the insights are generally not the people who own the decision. We are client service, and the decision makers are our clients. And the best that we can do is serve our clients to the best of our ability by understanding their questions and creating insights that are going to actually answer those questions meaningfully, so that, as you said, less risk, more confidence, and an ability to make a decision that can actually change things.
I want to go back to, you had said something earlier about the gap. I'm going to call it something here, the insight decision gap. And you had mentioned about the ability to put the two together. And this is the way I was envisioning that when you were talking. So you've got insights happening over here. Okay. You've got the decisions happening over here. And what I was visualizing as you were talking about that is there's, the bridge, as I think you called it, it just never occurs between the two, whether at the start or at the end. Like the entrepreneur thing made that connection very clear at the start. The story that we talked about, it was at the very end. I mean, we crawled with our fingernails crawling up the hill to the top where, the king resided. That gap is real, number one, as you just said. And I think it comes in different flavors. I was going to give you some examples here, and then I want your thought on this too, because this is what I've seen on the outside looking at bigger companies. and every time I see this kind of stuff, I just get amazed. But so number one for the gap that I've seen is it's entirely created and enforced by executives who just don't care. Not picking on executives here, but if you're a marketer listening to this and you feel you're banging your head against something, and I know those marketers very well, they're very frustrated, et cetera, this could be part of it. So if we go back to episode one, we told a story about AT&T, brilliant think tank. All management, all executives wanted to hear was, AT&T is awesome. We're doing great. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. My story, I don't think, John, you've even heard this one, but this was early in my career that really let me know about this whole problem. Was done the research for a Fortune 100 company. I'm back at their corporate offices. The main guy takes me out to lunch, some executive something. Anyway, we're having lunch, and I mean, he is killing me on the outcome of the research. And I'm going, this says good things for you. I don't understand why you're challenging me that this is true or not. I just don't get it. And finally, I just said, look, man, the only way you cannot believe that this is real is if you don't believe your customers. And he laughed so loud, the whole restaurant's staring at us, slams a table, leans across and goes, frankly, John, we don't give a damn what our customers think. That is like that. It exists. It exists from when it first happened to me all the way through. And I am very aware of it. And I try to avoid that situation because you can't win. You just can't win. Went on, did the presentation. Nothing changed. Really, really? I wonder why. So that's one of the reasons. But then it can also be driven by, I've seen this as, oh, this is just recent. This came up. So a manipulative executive leadership, and I'm not picking on executive leadership, but you know what? It does start there. Okay. Now I have to again address this for the marketers listening, because God bless you guys. You got a lot above you that you got to deal with, or the product people, you got a lot above you. I get it, but I'm just going to help you understand it exists. Maybe there's a way around it. Maybe not. Maybe if you see this, you just should move on. So here's the thing with this guy. Nobody even knew that there was a researcher in the company. This is one of the world leaders in this industry. And nobody even knew that there was a researcher there. Why? Because the researcher was over here, pet researcher of the executive, did the research that CEO told him or her that she needed done so he could go make nice to the board and make nice and basically put screws to his teams. And nobody saw what she produced but him. And it was only produced to support his views. Okay. So those are two really extreme examples, but it's there. Now, I'm going to switch over to our industry a little bit because I ran into this a year ago. Oh, and again, it's a marketing team. My God, love you guys. So marketing team came to us and goes, we'd love to work with you on the stuff that you're talking about. We just think that that would be awesome for you to bring this in and kind of revolutionize, get our stuff going. We've got to get answers. Don't you have an insight team? You guys are huge. You should have an insight team. Oh, yeah. We got an insight team. Well, shouldn't they be involved? No, we can do it. Ultimately, they had to get them involved because the insight team did have a direct line to certain people. And the marketers were pleading with them to meet with us. Finally, the 3 people from the Insight team do meet with us virtually, with the marketers also sitting there virtually. And there were 3 researchers, and I kid you not, the first, and we were all visual, and the first was literally eating lunch. I mean, seriously didn't pay attention to anything that was going on. The second was working out on a treadmill while this is happening. So, phone here, bouncing like this. Hey, yeah, I'm really paying attention. And then the third actually, and I kid you not, fell asleep during our 10 minutes of, hey, this is what your team is asking for, and this is what we would do. And then at the end, the marketing team is like pleading with them to at least give what we're talking to about a try. And their response was, nope, nothing to see here. We're doing great. And they literally told their marketing department in almost so many words, shut up, go back to your cubicles, be happy where you're getting what you are from us. Okay. Now, long story short, remember that only took place a year ago. That company's already been acquired. And the first group to get fired was the Insights Group, because a new marketing team brought the power to the table that they should have had in the first place. Here's the point. If you don't see this already, and then Johnny, you're going to jump in. All of this idea about decision gradient intelligence, the issues around it are real messy, or as we researchers like to call them, robust. And they're messy and robust because they always involve humans. This is not a technology answer. It's been a problem for decades. It will be for decades more if you're not approaching things from this decision grade perspective. And this is why. Okay, John, any stories you got to tell on this front?
Yeah, actually, I have ones that would almost mirror everything that you said. I was at a meeting once with the president of a network, really intelligent guy, very, very book smart, very accomplished. Also, though, very intellectual and didn't really have, well, he had no affinity for the programming that this network actually put on. And I was in a meeting with him one time where he goes, I don't care about the audience whatsoever. I just want them to think that I do. I was like, wait a minute, did I just hear that? And I was like, holy, yeah, that's what he just said. I was at another network where we put together some research and went to present it to the president, who said that he had seen some absolutely contradictory research about this. And that was when I discovered that, yes, he had his own personal researcher who had her own budget
Mm.
completely separate and apart from the larger group that I was a part of.
Mm-hmm.
And she had her own little fiefdom, and she could do whatever she wanted, run whatever she wanted. Of course, whenever he had something to do, she had to do that. But aside from that, she had money to just throw at whatever she felt like. And a lot of times she would just wait to find out what we were working on and then go off and do her own little approach toward it, or her own little
Yep.
angle toward it. And then we would
Yep.
find out that, something else was going on. But I think, and to your point about the people who were eating lunch and on the treadmill, the insights group that was doing that, which is, obviously very rude, but it's also, I mean, you called it a human problem, John, but yes, it is a human problem. But what it is it's politics, and it's about understanding politics. And that's another thing that, from the insight side, from the client service side, which is the side that you and I are both on, even though we're on different sides of the fence, understanding that helps to understand the business decisions that must be made. I suggested that it wasn't just the business decision, but the pressures around it. And I was sort of alluding to the fact that there are political pressures around it. I mean, people are constantly thinking, I mean, sadly enough, it's not always just altruistic, what's best for the company. What's best for my revenue generation is going to be what's best for my career, what's best for my longevity. And that's kind of how they sometimes see, the elimination of risk. The other thing about that, and this also plays into politics, and many, many, many times, and especially with you and the many times that we have worked together within a company, right? The outside person will have a voice that has more gravitas internally than the people who actually work at the company. In other words,
Yeah.
I know you have your name tag that says expert on it, which you cherish.
I do. I got it somewhere.
But it can be, and this is one of those situations where it can be somewhat threatening to the insights group. If they had pursued what the marketing people were asking them to, and it was successful, and you presented it, and it wasn't the internal team that had done this, then they think that they look bad. And so by just disdaining it and treating you as rudely as they did in that particular phone call, they thought that they were protecting themselves. And actually, they wound up doing themselves a lot more harm than good. But there's politics that play into all of this, John. And we have to understand that from our side of the thing. We must understand that. And the better we understand it, the better we can actually create the insights that people can rely on and feel confident about, not only from a business perspective, but from an internal political perspective too, if we have sensitivity toward that.
I got to ask you more on this because you are coming from the internal side. I do have the luxury of floating in on the magic carpet, whipping
Yeah.
out my expert tag. People
Oh,
go, "Oh, look at you. You've worked for," put a big name in there. I've worked for them. So that does, I guess, jade my view a little bit. So let's talk about that insight and decision gap. Okay. You're on the inside. You know about the politics. Frankly, John, I know you went through so many politics in your lifetime. I just couldn't do it.
I
That's
know.
not me. I'm not wired that way. That's
Yeah.
why we're on different sides of the table.
Well,
But
I'm
what
not
would,
any great shakes at it.
Yeah. So, what is it that you have taken away from all your years of being in those situations over and over and over again that maybe is kind of a cheat sheet or whatever you want to call it for someone in that situation on either side of the fence? You're either on, like you said, the programming side, trying to represent them to get something done, or you're on the insight side, knowing you have to get something done that you should get done. Is there some way to bridge the insights over here versus decision over here, that gap, given the politics being so heavily influential?
Well, the politics aren't necessarily always there, but more often
Mhm.
than not, on the corporate side, they certainly are. That's why I think, the one thing that from the insights perspective, it's about creating relationships internally so that people begin to understand you and trust you, and they will share more with you. It's not just about like, well, what is it you're trying to do? I'm trying to sell this program in Poughkeepsie. And the station manager there, he loves sitcoms. And so that's why we want to do it this way. That's, one thing. The other thing can be though, like, I haven't sold a show in Poughkeepsie in this long and I need to, otherwise, my boss is going to come down on me and I've got a mortgage and this and that and the other. And you don't learn that until you build up a relationship with that person and you're able to deliver stuff to them where slowly that trust builds. That's one of the things that can be so frustrating from my side is, like I told you before, I try and, when I mentor young people, I ask them, go have a personal conversation with the person that is asking you for the information, if it's possible. If not, at least have a phone conversation, but definitely talk to them personally. Get away from texting and emails. Actually go face to face when you can. Because when you build up that trust and then you're able to deliver something that they want, the next time they're going to share a little bit more with you. And the more they share with you, the more that you begin to understand the pressures, not just of the immediate business decision, but maybe the decision from an even larger perspective. That also, from my side, is the way where you can eventually build up enough trust, ideally, where your voice might be at least equal with yours. And to be honest with you, for me personally, I mean, there's no cheat sheet other than to, and this might sound a little Pollyanna or whatever, but when I do work, I do two things. I try and put together as much as possible. I want the person to be as informed as possible in an intelligent way to be able to make a decision. And I just do what I think is going to be best for the company. I want to do the best possible work that's going to lead to the best possible decision for the company.
Mm.
I don't like
Yeah.
to do work to say, oh, here, let me help you keep your job, or let me help you undercut that person, or let me help you skirt these issues. It's more, that's the way that I can best work. And that's how I developed, some really valuable relationships that I still cherish to this day.
So trust and remembering that it's humans and humans are messy, and then you just keep building on a trust ladder, I guess would be what you're trying to
Absolutely.
do.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to write that down. We're going to talk about trust
Trust.
ladders. This is great. Okay. Stay tuned, folks. We're going to get into this more deeply in a couple more episodes. All right. No, that's great because it is entirely different when we're brought in. We're on the outside, we're against other people on the outside who may or may not have a bigger name. They probably have worked with some of the same companies we have. So, I mean, it basically becomes, let's line up and measure what we got, and that's the one who gets the job type of thing. It can be that. But what I have found, especially in today's age, is, and it does go to the trust thing. Geez, this is so simple. The idea of a testimonial or a referral, still the best thing that you can have out there is, I think you said it when we were like preparing for this, the idea that yes, I have a little expert name tag, but it's so much better when after the fact someone comes up and puts their hand on your shoulder and goes, "My God, you really know what you're talking about." That just it goes so much further. So anyway, that's interesting. Okay, trust ladder, we're talking about that later. So moving from insight and decision gap into a matrix where I have spent some time thinking on this because I wanted to leave everybody who listens to this with something that they can use when we're done. So, insight and decision power matrix. Yes, I just came up with wonderful words there that are just so original. But this is the idea that when there's a lack of connection between insights and business impacts, what can you actually do to bridge that gap? Okay. And this is how I'm encouraging leaders to think about it that are listening to us. So this is kind of a power matrix. Now, it turns out when I looked at this and thought about what we had been talking about, you really have two powers that be. You have insight. Now, here's your little graph. Insight goes this way, decision power goes this way. Okay. And then we're going to do quadrants, right? Here we go. Everybody as a consultant has to have this kind of stuff. So high insight power would mean very credible evidence, strong analysis, most importantly, real customer understanding. So, like what we just described that we had done. And then decision power also means, or further means, the intelligence goes to someone who can make the decision on what the company does with that insight. So, if you look at what you just said with that description of what happened with the firm you were with, it was definitely up there in decision grade impact and power and everything. It was up in the upper right-hand quadrant, high insight power, high decision power. Again, that's why we can say, what more do you want? I mean, we can't do any more
Well,
than
we
that.
crossed over from the high low to the high high is what we did.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly.
But
So if you think about this, let's see, insight on this side, decision here, and you go upper left quadrant if you're drawing this out. So you've got high insight, low decision power. So it's up in this quadrant for insight, but it's down here for the low decision power. You've got smart work, you've got beautiful storytelling that we talked about last time, but no impact. You basically have what we're going to call insight theater. I like that name. So that's when organizations produce impressive intelligence and no one has any authority to act on. So that's insight theater. Now, you can go with low insight and low decision power. Believe it or not, lots of people sit here, lots of data, lots of research. There's no clarity on what they're doing. This is classic research and insights hamster wheel. But we've done it in the past. We're going to keep doing it. This is what we've always done.
sandwiches and treadmills.
Yeah, exactly. And this, honestly, this is why, and you can't blame leaders for thinking this way when you actually think about that group. They go, there's no impact, so it does nothing. It doesn't help me. And that's why it's on the first chopping block if there's a budget reduction or anything else.
Yep.
Then you have low insight. So again, insights are low insight, but high decision power. Okay.
Yep.
So this is the opposite of that last one, which I'm going to call activity delusion. This is leadership guesswork. And this is where the leaders make the big decisions anyway. And there's either little or no or very weak insight intelligence. So this quadrant explains why many companies say they're data driven. And then you look at all of their decision-making outcomes and it's, well, that was Vice President so-and-so's gut said we should be there. You've been in those meetings, I've been in those meetings, and you go, well, why are we going down this path? Well, that seemed good to so-and-so 6 months ago. Yeah, that's leadership guesswork. And they had data, but the main decision was somebody, felt something after they were done with lunch. I'm not really sure. And then you have where we ended up, where we're in that upper right-hand quadrant, really high insight, really high decision power. I call that strategic weapon. That's where insight reshapes the strategy. In our case, not something that went to market, but it reshaped the thinking of the entire executive group. There's no way they walked away from that table thinking the same thing as when they first sat down the first time or the second time or the third time. They were changed and their mentality toward the world had changed. And that's where decision grade insight intelligence lives. Now, if we're honest and we really think about all of the companies that we know out there, I'm going to ask you this, but I think people jump around from insight theater to leadership guesswork. And that's really where we end up going back and forth an awful lot. What are your thoughts on that matrix?
Well, I mean, it's probably pretty accurate. There's only one quadrant you want to be in, and yet that's the one that's probably the least populated through all of our experiences. I think the one that is the most damaging is the low insight, high decision making, because that's where your insights people, that's where like a bad reputation for them is, and is developed, and where they become seen as just a money pit where, well, we spent a bunch of money. None of this answers anything that I need to know. I'm just as naked and afraid now as I was before all of this work got done. Why the hell are we paying these people? I could be spending the money on something else, kind of a thing. And I think, once again, John, we're back to where we started, which is, how do we bridge the gap? Decision grade intelligence, it's not just the insights, it's not just the data mining, it's also articulating the decision that needs to be made and everything around it, whether it's, the business implications of it, the risks around it, the politics around it, and fully understanding that so that when you actually undertake the project, you're able to deliver something that puts you in that upper right-hand quadrant of high-level insights and the people who actually have the authority to make a decision.
And that is, as I mentioned, leads perfectly into the diagnostic tool I wanted to leave everybody with, because it's a simple thing. And I wanted to leave something concrete in everybody's hands that they can actually walk away with and go, okay, we can start doing this tomorrow. So this is really, really practical. Yes, a lot of thought went in it, but anyway, my whole point is just that you're able to walk away with something if you're listening to this, that you can go, okay, that thing that John just said right there about, well, how do we do this? How do we know what we're doing? This is where you actually can do something with this. So this takes about 30 seconds, and being the marvelously creative people that we are, I called it the 30-second insight test. Wink, wink. Yep. Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's going to take longer to explain it than it is to actually do it. Uh,
Expert my ass.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. I didn't say we were on the creative side. I work with partners that are much more creative than that. But anyway, that aside. Okay, here we go. You're a leader, you're an executive. You want to make sure that you don't have your money, your time, your effort, and such just falling into the money pit that John just described. So here's your test. There's 3 questions, and then there's kind of a statement at the end of it. Here's the 3 questions. Question number 1. What decision is this meant to inform? So what decision is this meant to inform? So not a topic, not some discussion thing, but a real decision someone has that they have to make, and it moves something if they make that, like it creates an impact somewhere. And if you can't identify that decision immediately, then you're probably looking at analysis without a destination. And actually, as you're going through this, listeners, friends, you can think of anything that you've done recently, a report, presentation, dashboard. You can use it now, even in the past, and see, oh, that may be why this didn't work or why it did work, type of thing. The second question, who owns the decision? And this has to be specific. This is not, hey, it's a company that owns it, or leadership, or the board. We've all heard that. That's not the thing, man. It's got to be a specific person, at least a role with maybe even multiple people in it. That's fine, but a place where they are going to make the call. And because if no one owns the decision, then the insight can be marvelous. And I don't know about you, John, but I've done these as well. You put together something, you go, wow, my goodness, where's my Nobel Peace Prize? This is awesome. And, leadership goes, what? There's nothing here. Nobody was responsible to make a decision off of what we came up with. Question number 3, probably the most important one you've talked about a lot, is what uncertainty does this remove? So we talked a lot about this time on episode 1. Every meaningful decision involves risk. Decision grade intelligence reduces that risk if the work doesn't clearly remove uncertainty for the decision owner. Can be interesting, but it won't change what happens next. And that's just why you end up with not being in the upper right-hand quadrant. So those are the questions. Now the heart of the matter. Final step in this test. Specifically, when you think about something you've done, or you're thinking about anything you want to do in the future, specifically after answering those 3 questions, name the 3 to 5 actions that resulted from what you did, if you're looking backwards, or were directly impacted by that work, or you want as a result or direct impact from the work that you're thinking about doing. So that's the entire test right there. It's just, if a piece of insight can't answer what question, whose decision, what uncertainty, and oh, by the way, what decisions are going to be affected specifically from it, then you're not looking at decision grade intelligence. It has to have it all, or you're looking at probably insight theater will be your outcome. So that's my 30-second insight test. And one thing for sure, if you're if you're not able to answer those about something that you've done before or what you're thinking forward, you're not going to be producing a strategic weapon quadrant type of thing. John, your thoughts on that? Yes, I know I went way longer than 30 seconds explaining. I warned people about
I'm
that.
just giving you a hard time.
I know.
Honestly, something you said way back when we first started today, I thought was really great, which is it can't be insights for curiosity's sake. It's got to be for consequential sake. So, curiosity, no, consequences, yes. That's it.
Have to write that down too. That was good.
That was yours.
That was good.
Yeah.
All right. One last goal that I want to leave people with, just so that they know there's an actual architecture out there that changes the industry standard from, is this interesting, to does this help someone make a better decision? That is what we have developed Actionable Insight to Impact method, or AIM, for. It make AIM do one thing and one thing only. It moves organizations from insight theater to strategic weapon in terms of the insights and the decision linkage between those two. And basically, by designing intelligence around a decision-making environment, which you've heard us talk about today, 3 things have to happen: clarity, what decision are we trying to inform; ownership, who actually makes the call; uncertainty, what risk is reduced for them to act. And if those 3 aren't present, then the work will never become decision grade. So we are landing the plane. John, you want to take us out and close us up today?
No, you do it. You did so well last week.
All right, here we go. Let's see here. Here's, I think, where we land. Insight is out there. I think a lot of firms produce it, whether they call it data analytics, AI, whatever, UX. I mean, there's just a whole bunch of things that are described as insight. It describes what the world is. Decision grade intelligence changes what happens next. So insight becomes valuable the moment it reduces uncertainty for someone who owns the decision. And the reason for this is simple. Leaders evaluate insight based on the decision risk. And most organizations are producing the first insights, and they desperately need the second, which is actually the decision grade intelligence. How's that for an ending? All right. That leads us to the next question. If decision grade intelligence is so powerful, why are so few organizations producing it? We talked on some of those ideas today, because the other question we're going to be solving in the next episode, because, we're just solving the world's problems right here. Why does so much customer insight work fail before it ever reaches a decision? And that's what we're going to be unpacking in the next episode. So this is exactly why we built the Actionable Insights to Impact method, or AIM for short. It's a way to ensure the work of bringing your customer into the decision-making process doesn't just generate insight, it generates the executive confidence required to act on it. So decision makers listening here, if you're a leader at an agency or within a company, you're doing marketing, product, whatever it may be, large or small, and you need someone to work with you to ask the right questions, get you the right answers that you need in order to make a decision that will have a business impact to make a difference, drop me an email. It's john@burscheckresearch.com, and let's talk. Thank you very much for listening today. Anything to add, John, at the end of this?
A friend of mine said this to me once a while ago, which I always liked. Don't be data driven, be data informed.
Yep.
There's
Love
a
it.
difference.
Yeah.
Right. And data driven can be a security blanket in itself. Well, the data said, right? But that's not necessarily insight. You have to have, like you say, behind the numbers are actual people. If you don't understand the voice of the consumer, then you don't understand the numbers, and the numbers aren't going to tell you anything. So be data informed, not data driven.
Love it.